morning, good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to the second webinar of the second season of the European webinars in Europe. Today we're talking about a very interesting topic that is data privacy and how Geotab works on that. There will be myself moderating the session. I'm Stefano Peduzzi. I look after technology solution and operation in Europe. I think I know many of you. I've been with the company here in Europe since day one. But our subject matter expert today is going to be Joshua Gordon. Joshua is in charge of our marketing activities in UK and is one of our most talented writers as well. So you will see him as a contributor for many of the white papers that I'm working on. Before starting the webinar and going through the agenda, one notice that is neither Joshua or myself are lawyers. So we are just representing Geotab in our region. So we are not giving any legal advice, and this webinar does not contain any legal advice. So it is always recommended, and this is a very important learning for how to deal with privacy, is that fleet managers and companies should consult with their legal counsel for all their privacy topics. But let's see what we will discuss today. So we'll have a brief introduction about Geotab. Probably you're all familiar with it. Then we will look at the theoretical background for data privacy and GDPR in the specific. And then we will look at some practical examples of how the Geotab solution helps in this. We will leave the last part for the Q&A. So if you have any question, and I will bring them up during the presentation. We will also, for any question that goes unanswered, we will reach out to you after the webinar. So very brief introduction on who is Geotab. So, you know, we are the world leader in connected vehicle solutions. We are an engineering company focusing on the development of an end-to-end solution for connected vehicles. We have more than 20 years of history, and if we look at our strengths, we have an ecosystem of over 400 partners all over the world. Our partners provide solutions that are complementary to the Geotab system. We have today over than 1,200 people employed at Geotab across all the continents. Here in Europe, we have coverage in every key country with our office in London as well. We've been growing extremely fast in the telematics space, and in January 2020, it was announced by ABI Research that we were the world's largest commercial telematics company. That's a recognition we're very, very proud of. Today, we have over 2 million active vehicles that are using the Geotab solution, with over 40,000 customers all over the globe trusting Geotab and our partners. We work with any size of fleet, from the single person to very large organization with over 100,000 vehicles managed directly. Clearly, if we look at the privacy side, I think the topic is more discussed with very large organizations, but the important message is that the Geotab solution offers the same strength in terms of privacy protection and tools for any type of size. So it doesn't matter if you have 5 vehicles or 50,000 vehicles. So you will have this same set of ammunition to work around privacy. But let's move to the theoretical background. So, and I will switch over to Joshua. to guide you through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much there, Stefano. So yeah, again, my name is Joshua Gordon, and I am the marketing manager for the UK and Ireland for Geotab. So first, I'm going to go through a bit of a theoretical background of what data privacy is, and then we're going to move on towards how the My Geotab platform can help fleets be data compliant. So first of all, so common descriptions of what data privacy and personal data is. So essentially privacy, it describes the rights and obligations of individuals and organizations with respect of a few main things. So the collection, use, retention, disclosure, and disposal of personal data. And personal data is essentially the data subject, so the individual in which the data is regarding. So a very simple example here is when you all signed up to this webinar today, there would have been an option where you could tick to say, can Geotab use your information for marketing purposes? And if you tick that box, it would identify that you're giving us as an organization authorization to use that data. So in simple terms, that is what data privacy is all about. So data privacy is governed by the General Data Protection Regulation, which is from the European Union, which was enforced in May 2018, and it replaced the Data Protection Directive. And it's applicable to all EU member states. Now, you all may be saying the UK is no longer an EU member state. However, we're still compliant with European Union regulations up until the end of the transition period, which is set for the end of this year. So things may potentially change, but for now, we're still compliant with the GDPR EU regulations. And they set out one, the privacy notice. So that's essentially a statement defining handling practices of personal information. And a few of the key points to highlight here is the legitimate processing of that data, which I will go into a bit more detail in the coming slides. And the third point is there's fines in relation to not being compliant with data privacy, and they can be quite substantial. So it's important that you as a business are compliant with data privacy and GDPR rules. So for example, the fines within this legislation, it's up to 4% of annual revenue if you are deemed to not be compliant, up to a maximum of 20 million euros. So it's a big deal if you're not data compliant. So moving on to some of the data protection roles. So first we have the authority. So in this case, it would be the European Union that enforce privacy and data protection laws and regulations. And then many of you on this call today would be data controllers. So an organization with the authority to decide how and why information about data subjects is being processed. And we have the data processor. So that's where Geotab sits. So an organization that has authority to process data on behalf of the data controller. So as Geotab, we are processing data on behalf of the fleet owners and operators. And then, as I said before, we have the data subject. So that's the individual in which the data applies to. A little bit about the architecture and the movement of data. So where Geotab sits is in the data controller space. And depending on the relationship, there will be specific agreements that allow us to use or instruct for data purposes. So for example, between Geotab and the end customer, we have what we call the EUA, the end user agreement. And we also have the TOM, so that's the technical and organizational data security measures, which is essentially internal processes which Geotab use to ensure that we are data compliant. And then on the other side, we will have Geotab and the Geotab ecosystem. So we'll have the partners and the resellers, and that will, define how, as a partner and a reseller, you will grant access to Geotab in order to use and handle your customer's data. So that's through the customer and partner contract. And there will be a similar contract between Geotab partners and resellers and the end customer to ensure the control and the access of data. So you're getting the customer's consent and instructions to use that data. So legitimate processing under GDPR. So there are 6 legal bases for processing personal data, but the one that Geotab is specifically concerned with is the legitimate interest of the controller and the third party. So what does this mean? It means that you, as a fleet operator, are giving Geotab the authority to process your data for a specific legitimate interest. And that would be for operating your fleet. So it could be, you're looking to improve productivity, efficiency, optimization, safety, and compliance of your fleet. That would be deemed as a legitimate interest for processing that data. And there's a statement here, however, legitimate interest must be balanced against the interests, rights, and freedoms of individuals under specific circumstances. So moving on to a bit of the practical aspects. What are some of the Geotab product features, and how could it be deemed as a legitimate interest or a legitimate purpose? So for example, if you are an employee within an organization, you're interested in safety, you're the safety manager for the fleet. You would be interested in some of the product features, but not all of them. So you could be interested in things like seatbelt, acceleration, harsh braking, things around driver behavior that will enable you to improve driver safety. So that's an interest to you as an individual, and it's an interest to your business. So that would be deemed as a legitimate interest to be using that data. Another example could be, for example, a sustainability manager. They're interested in reducing the fuel consumption of the fleet. So they would be just specifically interested in the fuel levels and fuel usage of that fleet to reduce their environmental impacts. And later on, we'll go into how you can set these parameters for certain individuals to ensure that they just have visibility of the data that they need to carry out their business. So what you don't want to do is confuse privacy with security. So essentially, privacy is the rules that govern the collection and handling of personal information, whereas security is the protection of the data itself. And there is some overlap, when it comes to data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So you can have security without privacy, but you can't have privacy without the high level of security, so the protection of that data. So before I move on, I'm just going to hand back over to Stefano to see if we have any questions that have come through so far and see if we can apply some answers to it. So Stefano.
Just one question, but it's an interesting one, and it is related to the role of the Geotab partners, so especially Geotab resellers, and it is what is their role under the data protection rules that you were showing us.
Sure. So it's very similar to the relationship that Geotab has with its resellers, and then resellers would have with its customers. So for example, we have the customer partner contract, which enables us to collect and use data on behalf of the resellers. And essentially, there will be a very similar contract between the reseller and the end customer for the reseller to be able to collect and process the data on behalf of that end customer. So in this respect, they would be deemed as the data controller, right? So they're the controller and the processor of the information for the end user, the customer. I'm not sure if that makes sense, Stefano. Is that okay?
Yeah, totally.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Stefano. So we've gone through some of the theoretical background around data privacy. Now we're going to move into how the MyGeotab platform can help you be compliant from a privacy aspect. So the first is applying groups and subgroups. So the fleet vehicles that you have with Geotab, they can be divided into specific groups and subgroups. So it allows you to accommodate different organizational structures, allowing for departmentalization of generating and reporting data. So you can split out, depending on which group it is, what data is visible to that group. And I'll show you what that means within the platform just in a few moments. And also, you may have multiple users within the MyGeotab platform, but you don't want them to have the same level of security clearances. So again, I'll show you in the platform, but for each user, you can apply different levels of security to ensure that they're only seeing the data that is important to them in order for them to carry out their role. And the second point is personal mode. So take, for example, you have a driver that uses their vehicle for both business purposes and for personal. So within the MyGeotab platform, there are a number of ways in which you can turn on the personal mode. And again, I'll show you in a few moments. But what does that mean? In normal circumstances, if the personal mode is switched off, from the Go device, certain information will be pulled through to the My Geotab platform. So that's GPS position and speed, acceleration data, and engine data. But to be GDPR compliant, if you do switch to personal mode, it will stop data transmission of the GPS position and the GPS speed. However, there are some exceptions to that rule. Under certain circumstances where it may deem fit, there might be a reason why you want to have visibility of that data, even though that vehicle is switched to personal mode. So a few examples would be for court proceedings, if you are in a crash, and insurance purposes. So if there's a legitimate interest or a legitimate reason to have visibility of that data, Geotab can retrieve it. But again, I stress that there needs to be specific consent in order for us to do that. Okay, bit of a spoiler alert. So there is going to be an update to the personal mode feature within My Geotab, which will provide customers with more flexibility in what they deem to be personal and business. So at the moment, it doesn't let you choose between what is personal and business. But with this new update, you can decide what data is considered to be personal and private. Sorry, personal, private versus business. So I think we're looking to have this released in Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year. But those that are, part of the Geotab ecosystem, you will be notified when this update is released. So now I'm just going to shift into the platform just to show you a couple of things. So this is the platform here. So first, I'm just going to go through how you can develop groups and subgroups within the platform. So on the left-hand sidebar, if it's not visible, there's a little arrow here to show the main menu. And if you scroll down to rules and groups, and then select groups. So you have vehicles within the platform. You can then assign these vehicles to a specific group, and it's totally customizable, totally flexible to what you see fit. So we have a few examples here. We have some split by industry, split by region, split by vehicle type. But it's easy to add and delete the group. So let's just add one, just for sake. Let's add a group for London, and it will show the parent group. And then we can add a subgroup within London. So say we just want to show the vehicles within the borough of Hackney, for example. It will show there. And the group tree operates in a parent and child relationship. So what I mean by that, so if you apply certain rules to the parent group, it will automatically then apply to the subgroups. However, if you switch that around, rules that are applied to the subgroups doesn't necessarily mean that it applies to the parent group. So that's something to be aware of. Okay. Moving on to security clearances. So if you scroll down again on the main menu on the left-hand sidebar, you go to administration and then to users. And at the top, you will see clearances. So if you click on clearances here, so these are just some of the default security clearances that we have within the My Geotab platform. But again, completely customizable, completely flexible, suit the needs for you as a fleet operator. So I'm just going to take an example here, go into administration. So under administration, you have access to these specific features. And there's an array of features that the administrator could have access to. However, if I wanted to add a new security clearance, I can add a sub-security clearance here, name it myself, and then you can click and unclick which feature you would like that user to have. So again, very flexible, very customizable. So if I just go back here, and I'll just show you how you can, sorry, here we go, how you can apply these clearances to specific users. So I'm just going to take an example here. So here is the user, and they have the administrator security clearance. So that means within that administrator security clearances, you'll have access to all those features which you have clicked or you have unclicked for that user. So you could change it for them to show nothing, so no data, or to view only, so they can't edit. Again and again, so you can create your own clearances, use these to apply to a specific user. And also the level of data access. So based on the group trees, so the groups and subgroups that you've applied within the database, you can add which level of data they have visibility of. So I go back to the example of when I was saying, which product features applies to which individuals within an organization. If you have a sustainability manager, you're to say, okay, this user as a sustainability manager, I will set up a security clearance so they can just have visibility of fuel usage and fuel consumption data. So again, very flexible, very customizable. So I'm just going to move on now to personal mode. So there's a number of ways in which you can apply personal mode, but I'm just going to show you a couple of easy ways to do it within the platform. Okay. So again, moving back to the main menu, you just want to click on vehicles. And then if I click on a vehicle here, and you can see this vehicle is already in personal mode, but if you click on the top toolbar here that says personal mode, it will give you the option to switch that vehicle from personal to business. So going back to the slide that I showed you on personal mode, if I'm switching to personal mode, it means that that vehicle is no longer generating GPS positioning and GPS speed that's coming through to the platform. If I switch back to business, that data will start flowing again. So that's one way. Another way to do this is through the rules engine. And this is a fairly clever way of doing it. So if I go to, again, side toolbar, go to the rules and groups, click on rules, and then if I want to add a rule, so let's add a rule here, saying, let's call it leaving the office. So when I leave the office, I want to tell the Go device and the vehicle that I'm now in personal mode because I'm leaving the office and I'm going home. And I no longer want to transmit that data to the platform. And we can apply it to groups, to certain individuals, but again, it's based on the groups trees that you've established in the first place. So I could apply it to all of Europe, I could apply it to certain industries, etc., or certain vehicle type, just electric vehicles. And then what we want to do is add a condition. So for example here, let's say we're going from the Geotab London office. Oh, nothing is found. Geotab. Here we go. So when we're exiting that zone, we want to add there. Then we go to notifications, click on more, then we assign as personal business. So we'll assign it as personal mode. And there we go. You can save that rule. And then if we scroll down, we can see the rule active here, leaving the office. Leaving the office, which will apply to the groups that you assign it to. So it's very powerful, so when you, the rules engine is, one of the most powerful things that the MyGeotab platform can offer. Okay, so just to summarize, data privacy is super important for the reputation and trust of your business. If you're not compliant, as I mentioned before, you could be subject to significant financial fines. So it's important to be compliant. In Europe, it's regulated by GDPR that requires that fleet owners process data to pursue their legitimate interests. And legitimate interest is the key point here. The legitimate interest in the operation of their business, whether it be to increase productivity, efficiency, safety, etc., while protecting the personal data of employees. The MyGeotab platform has, developed different tools that enables you, the fleet operator, to adequately measure data privacy for end customers. So that's been a very high level of data privacy and how it works in practice. But again, if you have any technical questions or, quite in-depth questions, I would always advise you to consult with the legal team. So finally, finishing off, so we do have the Geotab community. So if you do have any questions around things that I've gone from the MyGeotab platform today, how to switch a vehicle to personal mode, how to use the rules to activate personal mode. So if you sign up to the Geotab community, there's Geotab experts and resellers and end customers at hand in order to answer your questions. So I'd advise you to use the community as much as possible to answer your questions. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it back over to Stefano to see if there's any more questions that we can answer. Stefano.
Thanks, Joshua. Really good presentation. And let's go to the Q&A. We have a question. This is from Jason, and he's asking what happens when a driver has an accident while in personal mode.
Yeah, sure. So as we highlighted before, when the vehicle is in personal mode, under normal circumstances, we won't have access to the full array of data. However, but in exceptional circumstances, you may be able to get authorization to view that data. So the data is still there, it's not lost, and it is retrievable. However, you just need authorization from one, the data controller, and two, the data subject. And again, it has to be for a legitimate reason. And I think an accident would be deemed as a legitimate reason to be accessing that data.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. We have another question from Andrew. Andrew is asking, where is the data for the UK hosted? Where do we store the fleet data? Yeah, so we are currently working with the Google Cloud platform, GCP, and these allow us to store end customers' data in the best location for the local data residency rules. In case of UK, we are today hosting the data in the European West data center from Google. That is, as Joshua was explaining before, this UK is still following everything that are the European regulation. Also that GCP has now the option to host the data in UK as well, with a new data center in London. So we are considering that option, either because it becomes a regulation for UK, or just because it makes more sense. Another question is around big data. So we had, I think this is someone that watched our webinar two weeks ago around big data, and he's asking how is privacy supported in the big data environment.
When it comes to big data, it's analyzing the majority of our fleet vehicles that we have within the Geotab platform. However, we're not divulging specific, data subject information. All of the data that we use is anonymized and normalized before we start using it. So that's because it's anonymized, we're being compliant because we're not sharing individual data subject information. Not sure if you have anything else to add there, Stefano?
Yeah, no, I think you cover it. So we go through process of anonymization of all the data. So anything that is personal information is completely removed from all the data set. Maybe just to add, this is related to the data.geotab.com and initiation solution. While for customers that use the data science package, in that case, the data is given just to them, it's not anonymized. So that's one of the big difference, but the data is only provided to the data controller. Okay, so we don't have any further questions. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks again, Joshua.
Okay, thanks everyone.